Actually, that might work. If I stay at this particular angle, and I put this here, so either like that, that kind of works. I can watch it and relax. So I don't know, this is some random shit I'm going to be watching right now.
I'll waste no more time, and I'm going to actually watch commercials. Let's do it.
Disclaimer crap.
Nothing offends me.
I want a little more ass.
A little more ass?
Super shit colors can get
Super shit colors.
can get moved in my hair.
What the hell?
I get rich,
What the hell is this?
Don't buy this product if you want poop in your hair.
I thought they have egg in it. I thought shampoo had egg in it.
This product.
They call these crispy golden ocean shrimp. The ocean golden shrimp. Isn't that a mouthful?
Oh my god, that is so wrong. He's deep throating a shrimp.
Restaurants introduces Jack and Bush for the food.
Oh, that is so gross.
There's old rolls, egg rolls, fucking shrimp, pork strip and strips.
As an appetizer or a main course appetizer, they'll do in a pinch. Boo! You stink! They'll pinch, yes.
What?
Jack in the Box restaurant introduces new finger juices from Jack in the Box. Crispy food. That's Jack in the Box.
Boy, nice car.
Okay.
That makes so fucking sense.
Super excellent, super tough, and super cool. My balls. So many of them.
Oh, I remember those.
What do we got?
I remember those.
Where do micro machines go for fun? Mike hard direction. Oh wow. Micro machines work hard at dumping dirt and throwing the crane and work hard at dumping toll action. Out cruising through the highways and byways toll plaza.
Fudge.
My super small dick.
Kid's got a super small dick. Wait, did I just hear that? I gotta go back.
My super small dick playsets each sold separately. You put them together. Super excellent.
Sold separately. Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Look at all the crystal princesses. There's Princess Crystal Art.
Her face is upside down.
I made it special.
Family Feud, YTP.
Welcome to Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey. Folks, we got a good one for you today. Returning for their second day from Burbama.
Where's Burbama at? Where the fuck is Burbama? Burbama, never heard of it.
Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Mississippi. And from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Mississippi. It's the Taylor family. Everybody's here trying to win themselves a brand new car. PJ, how you doing?
I'm doing
Brand new
great
car.
now that I'm on Family Feud. My phone, I don't have the air one.
Well, what do you do, PJ?
Well, I am a certified kid.
Okay, well, PJ, introduce everybody.
Oh, that will be it.
Here we go. Top 6 answers on the board. Steve Harvey.
It's car.
Eh.
Car.
Austin, if Steve Harvey were your neighbor, name his ass.
Oh, was it?
That ain't right. Hello.
It's pool. Pool. Swimming pool.
Steve,
What?
I want to be your knot.
Ooh, kinky.
Well, don't go away. We'll be back.
I guess you need relocation contract and shit. Well, you really say with apartments.com.
Well, my name isn't Car. Oh, no. That wasn't good. Again?
Don't take this.
I'm Ryan, and I smoke. I tried to quit with turkey. I tried to quit with Chantix. That didn't work.
Along with support, Chantix Varenicline is proven to help people quit driving or operating machinery. Chantix helps significantly more people try smoking. Decrease Chantix. Ask your doctor if Chantix is life-threatening.
I was so proud to be a smoker.
Yay.
Every day we are called to duty. Duty. What if there was a place to blow our arms, heads, and hearts, and let our troubles appear? The all-new Serta Perfect Sleeper. The most comfortable place to declare cease.
Well, name a mean wife.
That's pretty mean.
Fuck it. Well, Steve, she hot.
He be dressing.
He be dressed. Excuse me.
Listen.
He be dressed. Name a way a mean wife might wake her husband up in the morning.
Steve, she may shit on him.
Shit on him. Folks, we're giving you $5 on the green card. I'm Steve Harvey. We'll see you next time, folks.
The only way you could protect your skin more is if you had the vitamin E in almonds. Which you do.
Yes. Welcome to Family Feud. I'm your man, Steve Harvey, and boy, oh, we got another horrible mistake. If a football player loses his cock, what might he put down his pants? A sauce. If you overheard the word sluice in a conversation, what might they be talking about?
Ukrainian tanks roll across the Kherson Oblast, pushing Russian forces back to Crimea. Artillery shells rain down from the sky. Missiles and drones roar overhead. Troops slaughter one another as Ukraine reclaims what's rightfully theirs. The Russians continue to fall back. But there's nowhere left to go. Battalion after battalion surrenders. Ukraine's blue and yellow flag rises in Crimea for the first time in almost 10 years. Vladimir Putin stares at the satellite feed of his troops surrendering. He can't believe what's happening. This should have been easy, he thinks. Russia's military was massive. Its intelligence officers claimed that most of Ukraine wanted to rejoin Mother Russia. Now he's lost all the territory claimed in the initial invasion. Putin grabs the glass of vodka resting on the table in front of him and hurls it across the room. It shatters against the concrete wall of the bunker. "Gather the inner circle and tell them to meet me at the Kremlin," he shouts at the general on the far end of the table. "We need to get ahead of this thing before it's too late." Konstantin checks the incoming feed from the news outlets across the world. He runs a proxy server in his Moscow apartment to hide his IP from the Russian authorities. He's been monitoring the war in Ukraine since it started, and now it looks like Russia's finally been defeated. From the beginning, he and a network of underground rebels have been disseminating information to the general public about the truth of the war. They've exposed Putin's lies and led protests against the evil dictator and his administration. Thus far, the rebels have had very little success. The Kremlin controls all media outlets in the country. Putin surrounds himself with people who he can trust and who tell him exactly what he wants to hear. He's separated power in the government in a way that ensures no other entity can gain enough influence to depose him. But the people are angry. They've given so much for this senseless war, and all the Kremlin has given in return is pain and suffering. Food is hard to come by. People are being worked to death. Still, Vladimir Putin can't think of anything besides his own ambitions. Konstantin opens a coded chat on the dark web. He sends a message to rebels across Russia. It's time. The elites of Russia gather in secret. They never thought it'd come to this. They truly believed Putin could be controlled, but this is clearly no longer the case. They told him that Russia must win the war, or he'd have to step down from power, and now that Crimea is lost, Putin has to go. This group of individuals controls almost all of the independent wealth in the country. Their families have pulled strings from behind the scenes for centuries. They're not about to let Vladimir Putin ruin everything they've worked so hard to create. Even though Putin refuses to admit it, Russia is weak. Its military is in shambles. Protests are breaking out around the nation, and the treasury is running dry. The elites of Russia sit around an old wooden table and discuss their next move. The smoke of cigars fills the dimly lit room. It's been decided then. A large man sitting at the head of the table says to those gathered, "We'll have Vladimir step down and replace him with Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. He'll negotiate the reduction of sanctions placed on our country by the West, and we can slowly repair the damage the president has done." The other members of the elite nod their heads in approval. They discuss the best course of action to replace Putin. They'll first try to convince him to step down willingly. If that doesn't work, they'll make sure that the current president of Russia has an accident. Vladimir Putin's motorcade.
Your body wash with the dyes, the sulfates, the lack of legendary scents.
Vladimir Putin's motorcade speeds toward the Kremlin. A group of very powerful people have informed him that he has a meeting with Prime Minister Mishustin as soon as he arrives. As the vehicle proceeds down the street, it's stopped by a group of protesters blocking the way. They shout obscenities at Putin's motorcade. Some throw glass bottles against the bulletproof windows as others hold up picket signs demanding Putin resign and free Russia from his death grip. "Where's Rosgvardia?" Putin screams from the back of the car. The driver looks back at the angry dictator in the rearview mirror. "They're on their way, sir. It should only be a few more minutes." "No," Putin shrieks. "I want these dissidents dealt with now. Run them over." The driver pauses for a moment. He opens his mouth to object, but before he can say anything, gunshots fill the air. The National Guard has arrived and is using lethal force to disband the protesters. Russian civilians are torn to pieces by the soldiers' bullets. Putin orders the man at the wheel to drive over the wounded and fallen. He has no choice. The car bounces up and down as the wheels roll over the bodies of citizens lying in the street. Konstantin watches in horror as innocent civilians are butchered at the Moscow protests. It's clear Vladimir Putin and the current regime will never give up their power willingly. The rebels need to escalate their tactics. Konstantin pulls out his cell phone and makes a call he hoped would never come. He presses the number for a rebel codenamed Wolf. "Order the printing of the recruitment pamphlets," Konstantin says into the receiver. "We're going to war." Vladimir Putin bursts into his office to find Prime Minister Mishustin sitting at his desk. "What do you think you're doing?" Putin hisses. Mishustin rises from the chair. "Listen, Vladimir," he says, "our wealthy friends have decided it's time I take over. They've already deposited all the money you could ever need into a secure account. All you have to do is step down and allow us to move the country to a new direction." Vladimir Putin suppresses the rage welling up inside of him. "And if I refuse?" Putin asks. Mishustin lets out a sigh. "You know how influential the elites are. They've already ensured that you'll give up your power one way or another." He pauses for a moment. "Even if that means the guards need to force you out of the Kremlin." Putin shakes his head and smiles at the Prime Minister. "I understand." He walks to the window and looks out at the square below. Mishustin is relieved. He honestly thought the armed guards waiting outside might need to be called in to remove the current president of Russia. They've already been paid off, and the transition of power was going to happen either way. Mishustin is glad it didn't have to get bloody. "There's just this one thing," Putin says. He turns to face Mishustin, who is still standing behind his deck. "Those guards, the elites, paid off. I already had them killed. I would say tell your masters that they will not be rid of me that easily, but you won't live long enough to give them the message." Vladimir Putin pulls out a gun from beneath his jacket, aims it at the former prime minister, and fires. Blood sprays across the office as the back of Mishustin's head explodes outward from the exiting bullet. Putin holsters the pistol, walks over to his desk, and picks up the phone. "Give me the heads of the GRU. We have enemies of the state to deal with. Russia's civil war has just begun." Rebel groups start to rise up across the country. They take control of local governments and smaller towns. The cities are harder to secure as they have a large military presence in them. It's here that the rebels fight bloody battles that seem unwinnable. Firearms used to be heavily regulated in Russia for decades, but after Putin's invasion of Ukraine, it became easier for people to get their hands on weapons. The government was so focused on not losing the war, they couldn't see what was happening within their own country. The rebels take control of the military vehicles that have been abandoned as forces are recalled to Moscow to protect the current regime and put down any uprisings in the city. Constantine meets with other rebel leaders in a damp basement. No one here is of elite status or holds any power in the government. They're all just regular people, but they're also the voice of Russia. They speak out for everyone who's been crushed under Putin's boot or suffered as the mad dictator tried to create a new Russian empire. He has no regard for the well-being of Russia's people, and now they'll make him pay dearly for the way they've been treated. Constantine points to a series of lines on the maps. We need to take the railways, he says. If we control the rail system, we control the movement of resources across the country. We can leverage them to force the government to surrender. The other rebel leaders standing around the table nod in approval. Their numbers are growing every day, but Putin's military still holds all the major cities. Most of Putin's men feel it's their duty to follow orders and protect Russia from external and internal threats. Putin has constructed a narrative that the West is funding the rebel cause. He claims the rebels are trying to destroy the Russian way of life from within. Many have deserted Putin's military to join the rebels, but the misinformation campaign has been successful, and the ranks of the Russian army have been slowly growing as the population is force-fed pro-Putin propaganda. However, the rebels have launched their own information campaign, and freethinkers across the country are joining the cause. The plan of the elites has failed. Mishustin is dead. So, you understand why we've called you here then, the man smoking a cigar says. There's silence in the room. The elites of Russia look at the chef. Yevgeny Prigozhin swirls the liquid in his glass around as he contemplates the offer. The elites of Russia want to pay the Wagner Group to wage war against Vladimir Putin. For years, Wagner's done whatever Putin has ordered, but this group of elites has made Prigozhin an offer he can't refuse. The Wagner Group are mercenaries for hire. Yevgeny Prigozhin has controlled the organization from the shadows since 2014. He's become incredibly close with Vladimir Putin, but only out of necessity. His sights are set on becoming part of the upper echelon of the Russian government, and now the elites of the country are offering him a chance to reach the top. It will be incredibly dangerous to turn against Putin, but the reward far outweighs the risks. Very well, Prigozhin says. I'll have my men deal with Putin and his forces, but in return, I want to rule. There's silence in the chamber. The elites look uneasily at one another. Very well, a man sitting at the head of the table responds. If you remove Putin from power, you can take his spot. Yevgeny Prigozhin smiles. He rises from the table and proceeds to walk out of the room. Pleasure doing business with you, he says over his shoulder before the door closes behind him. You can't be serious, one of the elites exclaims. Prigozhin is a means to an end. The man at the head of the table says after taking a few puffs of his cigar, he'll not live long enough to see the power he desires. Vladimir Putin and his private security force run through the halls of the Kremlin. A bullet strikes the agent bringing up the rear. He falls to the ground but continues to fire at the Wagner Group's soldiers who are in pursuit. Putin was in a meeting with Yevgeny Prigozhin to confront him about his mercenaries taking offensive positions around Novgorod. Suddenly, a group of Wagner men burst into the room and began firing. Putin dove under his desk while a battle erupted in his office. The mercenaries were gunned down by Putin's security force, but Prigozhin escaped. Now the president of Russia is just trying to make it out of the Kremlin alive. Putin's security forces call for backup. Members of the GRU and Russian armed forces move into position. The mercenaries know they're in big trouble. The only way they're going to get out of the Kremlin alive is if they capture Putin. The dictator and his men scramble out the back door of the building. The mercenaries emerge a few moments later. Waiting for them is an entire battalion of soldiers. They open fire at the mercenaries, mowing them down on the steps of the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin cowers in an undisclosed bunker. He's afraid to leave its safety out of fear for his life. The civil war that's erupted in Russia has not been going well. Many factions have appeared since the war in Ukraine was lost. Putin is still technically the leader of Russia, but his rule is anything but secure. In recent weeks, rebel forces have assassinated some of his top lieutenants. They now control large parts of the Trans-Siberian Railway and other major rail routes across the country. The Wagner Group, who Putin can only assume is being controlled by the elites that tried to replace him with Mikhail Mishustin, have taken Novgorod and appear to have their sights set on St. Petersburg before they siege Moscow. Ethnic groups that have been oppressed by Russia for decades see the civil war as an opportunity to reclaim their homelands. The Chechens, Chuvash, the Buryats have all declared independence from Russia and claim to be their own sovereign nations. Putin's empire is fracturing all around him. He still controls the largest military force in the country, but wherever his soldiers are sent, there seems to be opposition. Putin thinks that if only he hadn't wasted so much money, resources, and assets into his invasion of Ukraine, maybe he could have crushed his rivals and remained in absolute control of the country. And the bad news just keeps on coming. Reports that Chinese forces are starting to invade eastern Russia reach Putin in his bunker. Originally, Vladimir Putin had called on his allies in the People's Republic of China to aid him in his fight to maintain.
Sup, Max? Happy vacay! You've got sun, sand, and me! A giant sin on your forehead!
Here we go.
Spring break! Woo! know what would be so fun? Cover me with a sweaty synthetic hat, and I'll just chill under the brim, festering my little heart out. This is awesome! Another one! Gosh, I love it here. I wish I could stay
of China to aid him in his fight to maintain control of the nation. President Xi Jinping told Putin he would send supplies and men to secure key positions in the eastern part of Russia. This was a lie. As Putin waited for aid that would never come, Chinese forces began to mobilize with their sights set on capturing areas that contained large amounts of natural resources. Constantine peers down the scope of his sniper rifle. The rebels received intel that one of Putin's top generals has a meeting with the mad dictator today. If they can track the general's movements, they can finally determine the location of this so-called president. Most of the Russian people don't recognize Putin's authority anymore. The rebellion's numbers have grown to tens of millions. Not everyone is armed, but the unified civilian population of Russia holds a lot of power. Workers who no longer want to answer to Putin's government have begun manufacturing weapons and supplies for the rebel cause. Farmers are harvesting crops and hiding them, so the Russian military runs out of food. The unification of the Russian people, who have suffered for so long under Vladimir Putin's brutal reign, poses the biggest threat to the president's success in this civil war. The elites of Russia have secured major cities using the Wagner Group and other hired mercenaries, but without the support of the masses, it's unclear if they'll be able to install the government they desire. The scariest thought for both the elites of Russia and Vladimir Putin is that the rebels fight for democracy. The people want a voice in their government, and they know that if either Putin or the elites win this civil war, the status quo will be maintained. The government will be controlled by a corrupt collective of individuals who only care about their own interests. Nothing is more terrifying for the other factions than rebels winning and installing a democratic government reminiscent of their own sworn enemies in the West. This is the one thing they've been fighting against since the rise of the Soviet Union. Constantine watches as the target steps out of his car. The general looks around uneasily. He's flanked by 2 GRU soldiers. This must be the location, Constantine thinks. He moves to the next window of the abandoned apartment building he's hiding in to get a better look at where the group goes. They proceed down the block and stop at a run-down structure. Rebel intel suggests this used to be an old KGB office. There's likely a bunker beneath it in case a nuclear attack was ever launched during the Cold War. This must be where Putin is hiding. Constantine knows he can take the shot now and eliminate a top general, or he can call in for backup, and hopefully the rebels can bring Putin to justice. He takes a deep breath and holds it. The general's in his crosshairs. He sighs the air out of his lungs, lowers the sniper, and picks up his cell phone. He sends a text to the leaders of the Moscow rebels to converge on his location. This is a big risk. It could be a trap laid by Putin and his allies to draw out the rebel cell. And if Putin isn't in the building, this could be all for nothing. Constantine packs up his gear and heads down to ground level. In a matter of minutes, rebel forces will arrive, and then it'll be clear if this was all worth it. The Wagner Group is facing its own problems in St. Petersburg. Loyalists to Putin have barricaded themselves in the city. Urban warfare is costing the lives of thousands of mercenaries and soldiers. The general populace is being targeted by terror attacks as the Wagner Group tries to get them to turn on the Russian army. This tactic has left tens of thousands of civilians dead in St. Petersburg streets. Many Russian civilians have fled the country seeking asylum in Finland and Poland. In other parts of the nation, the Russian people are crossing whatever border is closest to try to escape the chaos of the civil war. There's a refugee crisis on the scale of which the world has never seen before, and the most astonishing part is that Ukraine is offering to aid Russians who are fleeing the conflict. The war between Russia and Ukraine was horrible, yet people show signs of great compassion even in the darkest of hours. Ukraine is still recovering from the war, but with the help of the United Nations and various nonprofits, it's been rebuilding its infrastructure. The Ukrainian government has taken in Russian refugees and helped them reach other nations offering asylum. The Russian civil war is bloody and brutal. The Russian people are suffering at the hands of various factions.